Lockdowns, you've heard they are the only solution.
I would like to see a dramatic diminution of the personal interaction that we see in restaurants and in bars.
More of the country is closing down tonight.
You've heard that anybody who wants schools to allow students or businesses to operate or churches to open just wants grandma to die.
We direct a statewide order for people to stay at home.
100% of the workforce must stay home.
We need to keep locked down.
You must stay at home.
We've heard the only way to crush COVID is to end economic freedom in the United States. And that's a lie. It's a lie with consequences. Suicide is up, poverty is up, hunger is up. Millions of jobs are not coming back anytime soon. In just a moment, I'm going to give you 4 reasons that lockdowns are bad policy and should stop right this very minute. If you are not listening to this with your Raycon earbuds, you really should be. Click the link in the description right now to get 15% off your order. First, lockdowns were designed to not overwhelm the healthcare system, not to crush the virus. We've been told that lockdowns are necessary in order to crush the virus, but that is a radical shift in what we were told lockdowns were supposed to do. Remember 15 days to slow the spread? We were told that the goal was to flatten the curve. And we were shown this chart. There were 2 curves. One sharply rose, and then just as sharply fell. The other stayed relatively flat. The area under the 2 curves, the number of infections, hospitalizations, and deaths, was supposed to be the same. The difference was that the first curve, that higher curve, would spike beyond the capacity of the healthcare system like we saw in Italy. So we locked down. We did it to flatten the curve.
This is the point about bending the curve. A surge of cases will overwhelm hospital capacity.
We must flatten this curve and we must social distance.
Flattening the curve.
Flatten the curve.
Flatten the curve.
If we're able to flatten the curve.
When you see that beautiful curve that you're trying to flatten all the time.
The phrase flatten the curve. Flattening the curve.
Flattening the curve.
We flatten the curve.
Florida's flattened the curve.
That curve is flattening because we are flattening the curve by what we are doing.
We flattened the curve, but as it turns out, flattening the curve wasn't enough. Now we were told that lockdowns could magically crush the curve. Governors who reopened their states were ripped to shreds for having any curve at all. And governors who had already experienced a major spike in COVID, and in some cases, whose policies had resulted in mass death, were praised for having crushed the curve. Ron DeSantis in Florida was torn apart for allowing some beaches in Florida to remain open, despite the fact that beaches are one of the safest places on the planet to be safe from COVID. They are warm, they are out in the open air, and they are subject to lots of UV light. Brian Kemp of Georgia, said The Atlantic, was engaging in an experiment in human sacrifice for reopening. Doug Ducey of Arizona was ripped up and down for allowing reopening, so is Greg Abbott of Texas. Meanwhile, suspiciously, Jared Powell of Colorado escaped scrutiny despite pursuing similar policy. Could that have had something to do with the fact that Powell was a Democrat and the others were Republicans? It would be tough not to see the hypocrisy in the media treatment of lockdowns. The media ripped into people who wanted to go back to work. In fact, they said that you just wanted to kill the elderly to get a haircut. But if you're Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot or Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, you were free to head out to the salon and get a hair dry. The media tore into anti-lockdown protesters, but dutifully informed Americans that if you were protesting against supposed systemic American racism, you were actually doing something good and positive for public health. Second, lockdowns don't crush the curve. Lockdowns don't work. There's no evidence they crush the virus. In fact, where the virus has already been heavily seeded, lockdowns may actually exacerbate the spread. According to Donald Luskin of Trend Macro, writing in the Wall Street Journal, quote, measuring from the start of the year to each state's point of maximum lockdown, which range from April 5th to April 18th, it turns out that lockdowns correlated with a greater spread of the virus. States with longer, stricter lockdowns also had larger COVID outbreaks. The 5 places with the harshest lockdowns, the District of Columbia, New York, Michigan, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, had the heaviest caseloads. A study in the Lancet journal in July found similarly, quote, a longer time prior to implementation of any lockdown was associated with a lower number of detected cases. This does seem counterintuitive, but the data are the data. At best, lockdowns may delay spread, but they don't crush it. Ask New Zealand, where they locked down incredibly hard, and then had to lock down again because even in that isolated nation with like 7 people, there were cases from community spread. So, what does crush the curve? The virus moving through a community. That's it. European countries that locked down originally experienced a curve anyway. There's a common pattern to COVID. Where a lot of people have had COVID, the virus doesn't seem to return. Where lockdowns have been applied, COVID appears when people open back up. This has nothing to do with politics. It's just a simple reality. Northern Italy was crushed by COVID early on. Now southern Italy is spiking. Second waves aren't really the problem. First waves are. But first waves are inevitable. The only thing we can do is slow the spread and protect the vulnerable and the elderly. That's why it's so intensely stupid for the media to credit Andrew Cuomo for his treatment of COVID in New York. Cuomo, self-aggrandizing moron, even created a poster showing how he had crushed the curve. Look at this thing. It's ridiculous. He actually created a papier-mâché mountain of death to demonstrate his own wonderful policy decisions. And now he is writing a book on his terrific handling of COVID. It should be titled, If I Did It. Meanwhile, his own health department seems to have conveniently lost all statistics on the number of nursing home patients who died in New York due to Cuomo's decision to ship COVID-positive elderly patients back into nursing homes. Here's the reality. Cuomo blew it. States that didn't lock down didn't. Social distancing may be effective at slowing the spread in a free society. The evidence on masking is mixed, given that some heavily masked nations like Italy and the UK got creamed, while Scandinavia, which doesn't mask, didn't. But full-scale lockdowns aren't a solution to COVID. Perhaps the most insane part, our political incentive structure means that politicians are given credit for locking down under all circumstances, which is why Manhattan, where there are virtually no cases and no deaths now, remains locked down. We'll get to more of that in just 1 second, but first, these. Wow. Yes, indeed. Your Raycons. My Raycons, everybody's Raycons. Well, they're not yours unless you go buy them right now by clicking on the link below. These Raycons are fantastic. Raycon offers their wireless earbuds in a range of fun colors and patterns. They are super comfortable. They come with a variety of fit options. The compact carrying case, it can charge earbuds 4 times on a single charge. Unlike some of those other wireless options, Raycon earbuds are stylish and discreet. No dangling wires, no stems. They are excellent for video chats. You know how many people wear Raycons? Celebrities like Cardi B are obsessed with Raycons. Look at this. These Raycons right here. Look at this. My God, the magnificence. Behold, blue steel. And they fit in your ears absolutely wonderfully. And if they don't, then you can customize them. Raycon earbuds start about half the price of any other premium wireless earbuds on the market. They sound just as amazing as the other top audio brands that you know. Raycons are great for working from home and working out, listening to music and podcasts for hours without driving your roommates, significant other, children, or neighbors crazy. And again, those everyday E25 earbuds, those are the ones you want. 6 hours of playtime, seamless Bluetooth pairing, more bass, a more compact design that gives you that nice noise-isolating fit. It comes in new, fun colors, not just blue steel, but other new and fun colors as well. Click the link in the description below to get 15% off your order. Third, the costs of lockdown are extraordinary, both in terms of economic cost and human life. The cost of lockdown, insane. Internationally, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention surveyed people in 20 African countries. They found that more than 2/3 said they would run out of food and water if they had to stay at home for 14 days. The New York Times reported in April that the lockdowns could create an unprecedented hunger emergency, doubling the number of people facing acute hunger to 265 million people by the end of the year. Countries like Spain and the UK have reported second quarter GDP drops exceeding 20%. The US did better, but still dropped 10.6%, as did Germany. In the United States, lockdown cost the economy trillions of dollars. 30 million jobs disappeared in the US in just 6 weeks after lockdown began. A study from Wellbeing Trust found that lockdowns could lead to 75,000 deaths from suicide and other deaths of despair. Dr. Scott Atlas of Stanford, Professor John Burge of the University of Chicago, Professor Ralph Keeney of Duke, and Professor Alexander Lipton at Hebrew University found that for every month of lockdown, the American economy lost $1.1 trillion. In July, the Washington Post reported that 17,000 excess deaths due to factors other than COVID were reported in just Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, and New Jersey. And that was just during March, April, and May. And that's because people weren't going to the hospital for other conditions. By May, over 100,000 small businesses across the country had closed permanently. Furthermore, because COVID disproportionately harms the elderly, the average age of death across the world is about 80, the cost to other populations in terms of lost years of life thanks to lockdown, that measures premature death against life expectancy, has far exceeded the cost of COVID. Atlas et al. Wrote, quote, "Considering only the losses of life from missed health care and unemployment due solely to the lockdown policy, we conservatively estimate that the national lockdown is responsible for at least 700,000 lost years of life every month, or about 1.5 million so far, already far surpassing the COVID-19 total. Children have been damaged by being barred from schools, despite the fact that COVID is significantly less deadly to young children than the flu, and the fact that, by most studies, children are not a chief transmission vector for adults. Finally, lockdowns are not the only choice. So far, the only solution to the virus is to protect the vulnerable and then open up. We have been provided a false choice. Completely open up or completely lock down. Well, there is a third choice. Open with social distancing and other precautions while protecting the vulnerable. The media enjoy lying by omission while discussing lockdown. They pretend that young people being diagnosed with COVID is a grave threat. It isn't, unless they are transmitting to others who are vulnerable. They suggest that case count is relevant rather than hospitalizations and deaths. They pretend that vaccine development is the only solution and we should stay locked down until then. None of that is true. We know social distancing can minimize transmission of the disease. Some research suggests masking can help slow the spread of COVID, though the evidence is mixed. We also know that the most important thing is ensuring that the elderly and vulnerable, you listening, Andrew Cuomo, are protected from COVID. This means particularly testing everyone who enters nursing homes. More than 45% of all deaths from COVID have occurred in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. And there is some good news here. Studies suggest that pre-existing T-cell immunity means that many people will not get COVID or will be asymptomatic. This has led some scientists to speculate that the actual rate of antibody presence conferring a low level of community spread might be 20% or 25% of a population rather than the 80 or 90% typically associated with herd immunity. Here's what we certainly know. Where the virus burns through, it has not burned through again, which suggests that protecting the vulnerable, slowing the spread so we don't overwhelm the healthcare system, providing time for therapeutics, and getting back to work is the best strategy. Lockdown is the worst strategy. Lockdowns are bad policy. They were justifiable at the beginning of the pandemic because we didn't know anything about COVID. But as time went on and the data emerged, politics overwhelmed science. That cannot be allowed to happen again. Lockdowns have to end, and they have to end right now.
All right,
Goodbye.